Pir and Toothy in another multiplayer game, and I'm going to have to mulligan that one. We only have one land, a couple of lands, some ramp, and a Sylvan Library. Yeah, not going to find me complaining about that. Okay, now we can go over the commanders really quickly. The game is underway. Pir Imaginative Rascal is a 3-mana mono green 1/1. If one or more counters would be put onto a permanent that your team controls, that many +1 of each of those kind of counters are put onto that permanent instead. Toothy is a mono blue 4-mana 1/1 illusion. Whenever you draw a card, put a plus counter on it, and when it leaves the battlefield, draw a card for each plus counter on it. We're going to make use of Flooded Strand to get our breeding pool out of the library, put that into play tapped, and throw it back over to our opponents. Marwyn the Nurturer is an elf druid for 3 mana, a 1/1. Whenever another elf enters under your control, put a plus counter on it, and then you can add green for Marwyn's power when you tap it. And Marwyn has got on a Llanowar Elves into play. And we'll see this turn what else they've got going on. Meren of Clan Nel Toth. Whenever another creature you control dies, you get an XP counter. At the beginning of your end step, you choose a target creature in your graveyard. If that card's CMC is equal to or less than the number of XP counters you have, return it to the battlefield, otherwise you put it into your hand. And noteworthy that Marwyn has entered the battlefield now. Our last opponent, Gishath Sun's Avatar, has just gone for some ramp in Rampant Growth, which you would expect Gishath to be doing in the early game. We'll just quickly get down a... Do we want ramp? Yeah, I think I'd rather have ramp actually than Sylvan Library. Don't think a Thought Vessel is as threatening as a Sylvan Library. Okay, Gishath Sun's Avatar is the last commander. That is Naya for 5, 6, 7, 8 mana, a 7/6 with Vigilance, Trample and Haste. It's a dinosaur avatar, typically a dinosaur tribal commander. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library, put any number of dinosaur creatures from amongst them onto the battlefield. The rest go on the bottom in a random order. Meren just dropping down another land and passing over to Elf Tribal. And a Lys Alana Huntmaster has come down now. So that means a lot of tokens are going to be coming out onto Marwyn's side of the field. And this thing is going to get really big, which means it's going to tap for a lot of mana. Unfortunately in Elves, one board wipe can kind of see you out of the game, so we'll have to see what goes on, especially with Meren in play. I imagine Meren wants the odd board wipe to occur here and there. And tempt with Discovery. Well, I hope that Meren doesn't take the bait here, unless she fancies her chances of taking on Gishath. Typically with the tempt cards, you just don't take the bait with those. Okay, looks like Meren fell for it and went for a Tainted Wood. So that means that Gishath is going to get an additional land. Yeah, and it looks like the elf player went for one as well. Can almost be forgiven for going for a Gaia's Cradle, but no. Tempt with Discovery and the tempt cycle in general, you say no to them. We'll see what our opponent got there. They got into Myriad Landscape, which is more ramp. A Jungle Shrine, good to get a tap land out of the library. And then a Croson Verge, which is more ramp. So hopefully our opponents can deal with the Gishath, because we're going to be seeing one very soon. Let's just go for a land. We can get down Cultivate and grab ourselves a couple of forests here. And that's all we're going to do this turn. We don't want to show off to our opponents too much the things that we've got going on here. Hopefully Spike Weaver will help us quite a lot this game against Gishath. But if we remain wide open for too long, then we're just a prime target for them to swing in at us. Kiora might be able to help us against Gishath. It just depends if our opponents are wise enough to leave Kiora around. But then again, they can't leave her around too long, because I will absolutely get the emblem off with her. I think we might need to get down a Spike Weaver and the Sylvan Library next turn. I'm just worried about our opponent getting down something like a Merciless Executioner and forcing us to kill the Spike Weaver. Okay, Wood Elves comes down. That will trigger Lys Alana Huntmaster. And that will trigger the Meren, or the Marwyn. So that will get some more counters on it. And then the Wood Elves will enter, and that will trigger Marwyn again. Our opponent is not short on mana. Okay, and there's the Imperious Perfect, so that makes this elf army much more formidable now. +1/+1 to all the other elves you control. 3 cards left in hand, and plenty of mana in Guy's Cradle and the Commander. Yeah, Lifecrafter's Bestiary helps to not only draw cards, but also filter draws. At the beginning of the upkeep, you get to scry. Yep, and all this is going in at Gishath. That is fine with me. And Gishath just deciding to sack the Croson Verge. So he can now search for a forest and a plains and put them in tapped. And also going for a Myriad Landscape, maybe? Yep, certainly is. So just on the ramp plan, Gishath, after the basics land from Myriad Landscape, will have, there we go, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 mana. Don't think any of these are bounce lands, are they? Okay, Growing Rights of Itlamok. I think I definitely want a forest. And then, yeah, I do think it's time for Toothy. And if our opponent decides to feel threatened enough by that they will swing in at us, then so be it. We need to do something. We'll get down the Sylvan Library, and the good thing about Sylvan Library is that it does actually, you don't reveal the top 2 cards of the library, you do actually draw them. So anything that is triggered by draw effects, such as Toothy, we'll see those. Back over to Meren, who now, after the draw, has 8 cards in hand. See what she has in store for us. Okay, Sol Ring to start off. Notice that they've tapped down their black mana to do that. And going for Acidic Slime. Intrigued to see where this is pointed. Yep, going at Guy's Cradle, I think that's right. That's a lot of mana our opponent was generating with that. They do still have their commander for 5 mana that will tap for. Oh no, it's equal to its power, so yeah, that will actually tap for 7 mana. Only 2 cards left in the elf player's hand, but they do have mana that they can put into the Lifecrafter's Bestiary, which will draw them more cards. And they're getting down another Lord and a lot more mana in Elvish Archdruid. They're kind of vomiting their hand onto the board. 1 board wipe, and I think they'll be out of the game for a considerable amount of time. Well, maybe they can take Gishath out of the game here. And Imperious Perfect just making another elf token. And that triggers Marwyn. This isn't when elves are cast, it's when they enter, so it does include the tokens, which is how she's gotten so big. Okay, Gishath. Gishath looks like everything is going in at the Dinosaur Tribal player. Shame we haven't seen anything from Gishath apart from ramp, but that is such a frightening commander that I don't really mind Gishath being knocked out straight away. And I'm hopeful that Meren was holding back there and does actually have a board wipe in hand. And down goes Gishath. Pretty fast game for Dinosaur Tribal, but like I say, it is a pretty big and threatening commander, so can't really blame our opponent for getting rid of him. Alright, we have a Beast Within and a Mana Gorger Hydra. I think I'm pretty scared of that elf army. Yeah, I think we need to keep these because we need to try and dig for an answer. And we drew 3 cards there from the Sylvan Library. So that means that we get that many counters on Toothy. Let's go for the Hinterland Harbour. And I think we just need to Spike Weaver here. Be nice to get down Pir as well, but I'm going to hold up Beast Within as well as the Spike Weaver just in case that token army comes our way. Or actually, it's mostly non-tokens, isn't it? But I just want to create a little bit of separation between us and the elf army. If they're going to swing in, turn everything sideways at anybody, they might do it at us just to get counters off the Spike Weaver, but that kind of encourages them into Meren's direction, although they have a Death Toucher as well, so they'll have to be careful with what they swing in with. And a Kessig Cage Breakers comes down for Meren, so starting to try and get a token army of her own down. An Elvish Rejuvenator for our opponent. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You can put a land from amongst them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest go on the bottom in any order. But that will trigger the Lifecrafter's Bestiary, the Lys Alana Huntmaster, and our opponent's commander. And they do pay for the Lifecrafter trigger, so they are still at 2 cards in hand. And noteworthy that Marwyn is a 13/13 now. 2 hits from that will surely spell commander damage. And then a Sylvan Ranger, so a lot of triggers going off again. Might have to kill that Lifecrafter's Bestiary. But our opponent is also in green, and they have an Acidic Slime, so there's nothing to stop them from blowing up the Bestiary, especially if they can recur Acidic Slime multiple times throughout the game. And creating an Elf Warrior token with the Imperious Perfect, which has sent the commander up to a 16/16. You can kill that with the Beast Within if we're desperate. I think a Spike Weaver will do us just as well. Okay, we have a Marwyn the Nurturer, as well as a Lys Alana Huntmaster coming in at us. So I think in that case we need to remove a counter from the Spike Weaver. Now what I think we can do, if we get down Pir, we can activate the middle ability there, remove a counter from the Spike Weaver, and then put a plus counter on a creature. If we target Spike Weaver with its own ability there, I'm sure it will get 2 plus counters, so we can kind of keep it up on the counter front there. But we take no combat damage here because of the Spike Weaver ability. We'll draw some more cards and Toothy will become even bigger. Alright, Cyclonic Rift is exactly the type of thing we want. Don't know if I'm too worried about a negate. We'll put Forest back on top. Yeah, and I think we'll keep hold of the negate just in case. Now we have 8 mana after the land drop. I think that is just a case of holding up Cyclonic Rift. Does unfortunately mean our opponent will get an Acidic Slime again. Yeah, I would quite like to go for Pir here, but there's no... Well, actually, we do have negate up. I'm just wondering if our opponent is about to get rid of our Spike Weaver. I'm going to risk, and it is risky, but I'm going to risk getting down Pir. Then we have 2 mana to put a counter back onto the Spike Weaver. We'll have a mana to keep damage coming in with Spike Weaver as well. And we'll have mana to hold up negate. So I think we're okay doing that. I think this is... It is risky, but I think it's fairly safe. And we can't swing in at either of our opponents because of that Acidic Slime and the Elf Army. And I kind of want to show our Meren opponent who the threat on board is currently, if they haven't worked it out already. Now then, Champion of Stray Souls has 2 abilities on it. You can put it on top of your library from the graveyard. You can pay 5, tap and sack X creatures. Return X creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, yeah, we're going to allow our opponent to have that. They don't really have a graveyard, which Meren is absolutely desperate for, really. And a Satyr Wayfinder will help them get some stuff into their graveyard. Okay, well there's a Shriekmaw, that's useful. It's useful against us is the only problem, and Michaeloth, Ashnod's Altar and Dread Summons aren't as easy to get out of the graveyard. But Meren can get back Michaeloth or Shriekmaw this turn. Now what we don't really want to do is Cyclonic Rift after our opponent has already thrown down a Shriekmaw. so I think it makes sense to try and get Rift down before then. And as much damage as we can pile onto the elf player, the better. I think it's going to take them a long time, or at least a few turns, to get this board back up and running again after a Cyclonic Rift. Yeah, Meren's getting back the Shriekmaw. That is bad news for both of us as opponents, because Shriekmaw can kill anything that comes down. Probably might be going after our Spike Weaver so that we can't block the elf army. But luckily that's not happening this turn. Back over to the elf army now and see what else they can do for us. Oh, Growing Rights of Itlamok. Yeah, well that will flip over at the end of the turn. Yeah, we'll just let them have that. We're going to bounce their army back anyway, so it won't be as good, at least for a few turns. And we want to keep hold of our negate anyway, because I'm worried about what our opponents might do after we do a Cyclonic Rift. I think Spike Weaver's days are numbered thanks to the Shriekmaw that our opponent has, and we can't do anything about that with a negate. But they might try and use some instant speed spot removal on it. So I do want to keep hold of the negate for as long as possible. Yep, just vomiting out more elves. Our opponent doesn't really seem to be using any discretion here. I think they're at the point of overextending. Maybe have been at the point of overextending for a turn or two now. And Imperious Perfect created another token there before we went over to combat. Now we'll see if our opponent wants to swing in at us again. Yeah, they're coming after us. Let's see if our trick with the Spike Weaver works. We'll remove a counter from it and then put a counter on it. There we go, and we bump up to 3 thanks to Pir. So let's now remove a counter, and that will stop any combat damage from hitting us. And then I think our opponent might have a beast with him, but I think we can risk, yeah, we'll risk putting another couple of counters onto this. And there we go, we are going to be back up to 3, I think. Alright, we're going to see Toothy get pretty big here thanks to Pir being on the battlefield. He will definitely draw 3 cards with Sylvan Library. It's just a bunch of lands on top. How many creatures do we need to flip this? 4 or more creatures. That might dictate what I do this turn. Yeah, I think we just need to stay aggressive on this. I don't want to draw into more lands next turn. So then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. For a Garruk Wildspeaker, we can untap 2 lands, so that'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Yeah, I think we have to go for that. I think Spike Weaver is dead next turn because of, what's it called, the black creature that can come down and kill something next turn from Meren. And Garruk will get a plus counter here by untapping these, but it gets 2 counters thanks to Pir. And then we have 4, 5, 6, 7 mana open. So I think we are definitely going to wipe the board. Question is, do we want to do it now? Yeah, I think we just do it now. And then if our opponent wants to use their creature to blow up our Spike Weaver, then so be it. There's nothing we can do about it anyway. Okay, and our opponent scoops to a Cyclonic Rift, the elf army. When I say that elves are pretty susceptible to board wipes, that's exactly what I mean. I think they could have rebuilt there. I think they had time to rebuild, but that's what happens. If you just want to vomit your army onto the board, then you need to be wary of board wipes. They might have had a heroic intervention in hand, but that doesn't help you against a Cyclonic Rift. And now we've got a distinct advantage over our Meren opponent, and I don't really care if Spike Weaver dies or not at this point. They need to kill Toothy, really, because, well, they don't necessarily need to if they can chump block it. I'm just thinking of commander damage coming through on our opponent. And there we go, there's the Shriekmaw. And we'll see where that's going. Okay, Shriekmaw is targeting the Toothy. That will give us a hell of a lot of card draw. And luckily we're at nowhere near decking ourselves. We are at 64 cards in hand. And the Thought Vessel is doing what Thought Vessel does and having us not discard any cards. Meren has only seen one death trigger so far, so only one experience counter. But they can get back their Shriekmaw here. We can counter that now with a Pact of Negation, but we'll have to pay 5 for that the next turn, so we need to be careful. Back over to our turn, we'll draw yet more cards. Alright, now we can either get down a big Genesis Wave or go for a Doubling Season. I think we will keep hold of the Genesis Wave. No, I think we'll put that on top. And we'll just go for casting a Doubling Season maybe. Well, we'll get down a Command Tower. And I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for Doubling Season. And then we'll get Kiora the Crashing Wave down. And Kiora usually has 2 loyalty when she comes down. But she enters with 6 thanks to the Doubling Season and Pir. So that means we can get an emblem off with her straight away. And that's a 9/9 Kraken coming down every turn. Then we will untap a couple of lands. And that allows us to hold up Negate and the Spike Weaver. So I think I'm happy with that. We'll just pass the turn over to our opponent and see if they can do anything to us when we have lots of Krakens in play. We will get 2 Krakens here thanks to Doubling Season. It doesn't only care about counters, it also cares about tokens. Doubling Season has a great reputation for a reason. Alright, down comes the Acidic Slime from our opponent. They can get that back next turn, but I think I'd quite like to... Yeah, that's no doubt going at Doubling Season, and I'd quite like to keep that, so we'll just postpone that for a turn. We'll obviously have to pay 5 mana for that next turn, but I think we're okay. We at least get another couple of Krakens at the end of our turn. And then down comes the Shriekmaw. And this is probably going at Spike Weaver. They might try and take down a Kraken with it. If they can get enough death counters onto themselves, then they can get back a Shriekmaw every turn with a sack outlet. But I don't think that's going to be enough to stop the Kraken army. They'll just be pouring resources into treading water. Well, they are targeting a Kraken. I think I might go for Pongify on Meren. Then our opponent doesn't get any creatures back from the graveyard at the end of the turn. 5 cards in Meren's hand and 3 mana on the board. Okay, and down comes the Satyr Wayfinder again. We'll see if they get anything else relevant into the graveyard. It's been their only means of self-mill this game. Okay, they get into, Mind Slash, don't like that. Forest, a Caustic Caterpillar is relevant. That could, well, that's actually a cheaper way of getting rid of Doubling Season. Okay, and I'm not going to let it hit the end step because that will trigger Meren. I want to kill Meren off before the end step hits so that they don't get any card advantage from the graveyard. And that way they are kind of reliant on getting some kind of reanimator spell and targeting their graveyard with that. We will put another counter onto the Spike Feeder, remove 1 and add 2. Oh, and it actually adds more than that, doesn't it? Thanks to Doubling Season. So yeah, our Spike Weaver is even better than it was before. Now we have to pay for Pact of Negation. Luckily we have Garruk in play, so we can untap some lands at least if we want to. I think it might be time for Growing Rights of Itlimoc. We draw into the Genesis Wave we already knew we had. Yeah, I don't care about Strip Mine or about the island, so we'll put those on top. We'll stop the Ape from dealing any damage with Kiora. That puts 2 counters on her. And we'll untap some lands. I want to set up for an Overrun or Overwhelming Stampede, I forget which one it is, with Garruk. But we'll probably do that next turn. So let's go for another land. Then a Growing Rights of Itlimoc. We know 2 of the cards on top, thanks to Sylvan Library. And it's just a bunch of mana, so I don't mind clearing that away. And then why don't we just get down... Yeah, we'll get down a Hangerback Walker for 2, just for the sake of flipping over the growing rights of Itlamok. That will turn into a Gaia's Cradle. And now it's time to swing in at our opponent with our Kraken and our big Spike Weaver. Both creatures being blocked here, which leaves our opponent with no creatures in play. And I think it's much of the same through our opponent's turn. We'll flip the growing rights of Itlamok first. Kiora will give us a couple of Krakens again. And now we have a Gaia's Cradle that taps for green mana equal to the creatures we control. So we can, well, we'll definitely hold up Negate and Beast Within. But I think the main thing is we can make Spike Weaver really big if we want to, before our opponent throws the turn back over to us. Okay, down comes Meren again. And I would be half tempted to get down Beast Within on Meren at the end of the turn. If we tap down the Itlamok, we'll get 3, 4, 5, 6 mana. So we'll be able to put 3 into Beast Within and 2 into the Spike Weaver to make it bigger. And then when we get to our next turn, as tempted as I would be to go for a massive Genesis Wave, I think it's just rubbing it in on our opponent. We have big creatures in play now, so we can just go for Garruk and get a buff onto all of those and get trample damage through. Diabolic Servitude. Okay, yeah, I think that is negate worthy. We don't want our opponent reanimating any more of their stuff. And then just to make sure that they don't fish anything else out of their graveyard, we'll kill the Meren with the Beast Within. And then seeing as how we've got 2 mana floating, I'm going to remove a counter from the Spike Weaver and put it over onto the Hangerback Walker. And that bumps Hangerback Walker all the way up to an 8/8. It got 4 counters there. An extra one from Pir, and then that was doubled up with the doubling season. So even if our opponent wipes the board, not only will we get Krakens at the end of our turn anyway, but we'll get a bunch of Thopters into play as well. Twice as many Thopters as we have counters on here thanks to doubling season. And then passing the turn back over, so we might as well bump Spike Weaver back up again. And there we go. I think we have enough damage on board now. So we'll just minus down Garruk. And 10 counters on Garruk and a -4 for the overrun. So I'm not even worried about killing off Garruk this turn. Yeah, our opponent says good game. And yeah, I think the board wipe, the Cyclonic Rift, was definitely the thing that turned the tide for us. I don't know if the elf player should have scooped straight away, maybe should have carried on playing for a few more turns and tried to rebuild somewhat of an army, and then perhaps Meren and Marwyn could have ganged up on us, but unfortunately they just abandoned the game, and that left Meren to deal with us all on our own, and we were at a distinct advantage at that point, so it was bad luck for Meren in this game. They just got abandoned by the other players, but it was a good showing for Pir Toothy. Our plan there was to just minus down Garruk. That would have given all these things +3/+3 and trample. And then I haven't done the maths, but I've no doubt we could have swung in for lethal there. Would have been nice to get down a massive Genesis Wave, but that would have just been rubbing it in our opponent's face, and there's no real need to do that. If we have the win on board, we'll just do it as quickly as we can. So, hope you all enjoyed that Pir Toothy game. I'm tribalkai on the EDH channel. Thank you for watching.